So in this video I'm going to be talking about leads. Now they're all different shapes and sizes out there. Why do we use bigger leads? Why are they different shapes? In this video I'm going to explain all of that and what I use them for and what they really are meant for and why there's different shapes out there. So let's go. First thing is, let's talk about distance fishing. Now when you're fishing at distance, you're casting a long way, there's a lot of air resistance. Now you want a distance lead. That is going to give you, obviously from the name, is going to give you some distance, right? But there's also a lead called a tournament distance lead, which has got a very narrow end and it will even more punch through the air and it'll get even further. If you want to cast at a maximum range as much as you can, use a tournament distance lead. Otherwise, using distance lead is pretty much on average under 100 yards, I would say. Anything more, then I'd probably go for a tournament just to make sure you can get there with ease. There is one called a pear lead, which has got a much more bigger bottom onto it. It's obviously shaped like a bit like a pear. They are not very good at distance. I find that they sort of slow down because they haven't really got that narrow end and they won't go as far. I like to use them for stalking and casting out showing fish. They're not very far away because it makes not much noise, it makes a little plop sound on the water, so it doesn't make too much. Also on top of that, I'd probably use them for chod rigs as well. They're a brilliant one for that. If you're going at more of a distance and using a chod rig, obviously you're going to move on to more narrow leads that get you much further, but on average a pear lead should be perfect for that. I also use a square pear. Now that is probably something that I'm more likely to use on a chod rig if I'm fishing somewhere that's got a lot of drop-offs, slopes, different changes in depths as well, because it can constantly be moved. When carp come in, they move their pecks up and down. It does cause a lot of movement under the water, especially near the rig, and sometimes they can dislodge your rig and it'll roll off. And sometimes obviously when they're you have a false bite where they sort of start to pick it up and then chuck it out, they could just throw your rig right off the spot if you've got a lead that's round. So a flat one with flat sides will definitely ensure that it doesn't roll as much or less. And then after that is probably my favourite lead, which is a flat pear, which is brilliant for short range casting up against islands. I use mine as well for margin fishing because there's always another little slope or another little drop off. I always like to have like a certain depth of water. I'll usually go for a certain depth, so like I'm trying to find where that drop off is. There could be another one and something could throw it off the spot. They're flat and I think their profile is much better. Also a popular lead in a bait boat as well. You don't have to cast anything and then you've got a lead that sort of can sit there against islands and that falling off. That's why I really like a pear lead, because I think they're much more, they're harder to cast, but they're better at not falling off anything in the water. Now there is another lead called a gripper lead, which is very similar. It's a flat pear with little bumps on it, and that is mainly for rivers and canals, if they've got any flow, that is. And the only other thing I can think of is maybe if you're going out in a boat and you're going a long way in a big lake, then yes, that is definitely something you might want to use. Just that you can tighten down to it better, especially being a long way out, and it'll be a bigger lead as well. But I do recommend not using the bait bow as much. You can, but you can just use a flat pear. There's, you know, in a lake you're not going to get huge amounts under tow, so I recommend just sticking to the pear lead. Also inline leads. Now I tend to use mine for solid bags. I use the flat pear or the square pear ones. I don't really like any other ones. I've tried other ones in the past. There's ones that look like distance leads but with like basically just inline, but I just think that's a problem. As soon as something tries to touch it, it's just going to roll away the rig, and you want it to sit flat. A lot of the time I fish solid bags is either on bars or up against islands. Again, I don't want it to roll off, so that's the reason I prefer those two leads over any other shaped lead in a solid bag. And then the last things is a probe lead and a prong lead. Now these are for leading around and trying to find spots. Now this is using a spod rod or a marker rod, depends on what you got. I'd use a spot rod for everything really, but using braid and filling the spot is vital to try and find areas that are firmer or even softer if you're really looking for that. So a probe lead will give you the sensation of feeling the gravel or feeling slightly softer, but when you feel like a softer area, that's when I'll change to a prong lead, because it will allow you to figure out what that softness was. If it's silt, then you use a silt, but if it's like absolutely chod and rubbish on the bottom, or even blanket weed, could be anything. So that's when that comes into its own. I do recommend not using it on really, really weedy lakes, because it will just spend most of the time getting clogged up with all sorts of weed and stuff, and you just come back with a massive load of weed and it takes you forever to bring it in. So I do recommend using the probe lead first to find a spot on a weedy lake. Then the last thing is obviously why do we use big leads? Now it is to help set the hook, but sometimes the lead can be a disaster as well, because you're thinking, oh, I need a bigger lead hook to fish, it holds the hook in, but then the carp can use that to get rid of the rig. It can just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and it will just bump off. All you have to do is shake its head and it's off. I recommend if you use a bigger lead, either drop the lead or make the lead run. So either a running rig, or make sure the lead clip can move out as well. Just make sure they don't use that lead against you. That is what I'm pretty much saying. But we use big leads for casting as well. I don't recommend anything bigger than 4 ounce for casting purposes. I don't see a point of it using huge leads for no particular reason. I'm not entirely sure if you can cast anything heavier than that, but I've heard people using bigger leads and I just don't know why. I use between 3 and 3.5. It's my favourite sort of size and weight, and I think it casts much better. I can get further with a lighter lead than I can do with a heavy lead. I just pick in the right type of lead, which is the tournament distance lead, of course. Also, don't forget to pick the right type of colour and texture for your leads as well. Whatever lake you're fishing, that is the one you want to try and blend into. Look around the margins, see what the rocks are like on the bottom if it's gravel, look on the bottom to see what the silt's like and everything else, and pick the right lead for that lake. If you're fishing mostly day ticket waters, I reckon maybe a brown, something that blends into clay. Some companies do make them even more clay colour, and some they're close enough. So just look out for that sort of thing, and just test it in the margin. Drop it in the spot in the margin just to see what it looks like, and hopefully it still looks like that when it's out in the middle of the lake on your spot. So just make sure that your leads are similar to the lake bottom you're fishing, just so the carp don't spook from it. Make sure that it's not silvery and reflective and sparkles on the bottom of the lake and shows up really easy, and again that will just spook every fish in the lake on your spot. The probe lead and the prong lead don't have any coating on it, because you don't need coating on those. They are for just looking for spots, so you don't need to worry about that. And then that is pretty much it. That is my lead guide. I hope you've taken something away from this. If not, you know everything already. So all I'm going to say is thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, don't forget to check out all my other videos, and also don't forget to put a comment.